I used to go to sleepaway camp, and I mean, I wasn't really close with this girl, but I mean, some of the girls who were in my group live in Florida, and particularly this one who I wasn't exactly that close with, but I still knew her, and she was always nice, and she was always very positive to me, and so I found out about the Parkland shooting because a mutual friend of ours said that she had been shot in the leg. And so I was kind of shocked to hear that. I mean, I know we were in Disney at the time, and I know on the bus ride I was kind of like speechless, and I was like, because it was just weird to know someone.
And you really talked about Boca that morning.
Yeah, I was, and how my friends, some of my camp friends were from there, and it just, I mean, even though we weren't very close, it was just a horrible thing to happen to her. I mean, she was always so nice and positive, and
I just remember really freaked you out when we were sitting on a bus and she was just like kind of like in shock.
Now it's almost like everyone knows someone who is involved in the shooting, and it's just, that's horrible to think about.
We really do not have many protests in the years that I have been at Ward Melville High School. Most of what I heard about the walkout came from social media, that there's this walkout plan. It was not sanctioned by the school.
I found out about the walkout through Facebook when the movement blew up on like the Thursday of the Parkland shooting. And I just, like, watching all these videos on TV and stuff, just thought there's something that we should all bring awareness to. I started the petition because I had a friend that lives in Connecticut, and we were just texting one day, and she sent me a link to her high school, and she said, "Look what I did," and then I was like, "Wait, what?" And then she's like, "I made our school a location for the walkout." And I was like, well, that's really cool. And then I went to go see if Ward Melville was a location, and it wasn't. But then it came across, like, after, when I clicked on it, so, like, I accidentally, like, made an account. And then after that, I accidentally made our high school location for the walkout. And I sent it to people. I put it on my Instagram bio. And one day I just got a DM from the other members asking me to put the link in their bios and stuff, and I was just like, sure.
We had the idea, obviously, of making the walkout, and so we saw someone actually create an Instagram page dedicated to a walkout, and we had no prior contact with this person, so Haley decided to DM Bennett, who turns out was the owner of the account, and we all created this sort of group. It was us, Bennett, two other of our friends, and a small group of people who were working on posters and videos. So it was just our kind of core group.
Nerd.
The main purpose of Ward Melville Takes Action is to promote student protests, student peaceful protests against gun violence. It's about just making yourself very clear. So that's why most of the posts I've written for it have all just been on notes, and I've just read over them many times, and just to make everything very clear. Whenever I got any news about anything with the first walkout, originally the administration had supported it, and then they withdrew their support, so I made both of those things clear on the Instagram because I had to be the source of information for people.
We're all for the same movement. I know because my group is Student Acts for Change. We don't work with Ward Melville Takes Action, like personally, but we do, he was promoting some stuff that we were trying to do that ended up falling through, but another group ended up doing it. Bennett Owens, him and a bunch of other people got involved and were speaking with Dr. Baum about how the logistics would work. And then when Dr. Baum said no, everyone decided we were going to still walk out anyways.
So I'll start from the beginning. So what happened was I created the account. I posted something saying we're going to walk out on March 14th, or anyone is encouraged to walk out on March 14th if they want to protest gun violence. And after that post, a lot of people were liking it, and a lot of people had started talking about it, and then some 11th graders, and I think there were some 10th graders also, reached out to me saying they had set up a meeting with Dr. Baum. In retrospect, I wouldn't have necessarily went to a meeting with Dr. Baum asking for permission. But regardless, we did. And so they had set up a meeting with Dr. Baum. So I met with all of them and a few people, including Allie Wertheim and Emma Cowan, to a meeting with Dr. Baum. It was on a Friday, where he said that he supports us and that no one would be punished for walking out.
Why do you say, like, in retrospect, you wouldn't have gone?
I say that because it made it more messy, and also it just allowed them to try to control it. Not that it wasn't a very successful walkout, but it made it harder than it had to be.
So there was a superintendent letter that came out from the Free Village District. Can you explain what the letter said and its intent?
Well, I think the letter speaks for itself. That we're not going to condone, sanction a student walkout. That our primary concern is for the health and safety of our students, but we understand why students have concerns about what is going on, especially in light of the recent tragedies. They should have a voice and they should be heard, but in a safe and appropriate manner that does not disrupt the educational environment.
The march, as organized by the organizers, on a national level, was March for Our Lives, for school safety and for school security. Now here, I think on Long Island, many students were marching in support of more gun control. But however, in maybe another state or another area, students may have been marching because they want teachers to be armed, because that would be more safety and security. So while I support students standing up for what they believe in, I think that a lot of people turned this into a gun control thing, and it wasn't necessarily intended to be a gun control thing.
Originally, the walkout seemed like a pretty good idea. These students are very passionate about what they believe in, and as much as I think some of their ideas may be flawed, and that's obviously because of my political perspective, I think they should walk out. But as the walkout kind of evolved and changed, it almost felt like there had been some sort of shift in the way the walkout was being perceived. They had changed the walkout and said that they were going to be walking right up to the road, so they said in their post that some newscasters could film it, and so their speech could be heard by the news. And it just, near the end, it almost felt like the walkout was more looking for attention. A couple classes with Bennett, he seems like a decent enough person. I've never had a real personal relationship with him. I'd love to discuss these issues with him, but he never seems to want to talk to me about them.
I went on Google and about the walkout at Ward Melville, and the only thing I can say was that all the quotes were from him. Of course, one person can do a lot, but I feel like there should have been more than one face to it.
I think if there were more people involved in advising Bennett and running the Instagram account, perhaps they wouldn't post a message and then have to change it completely. I'm not sure, because I know Bennett himself runs the account.
Yeah, and I don't
so
know if anyone else has control over it.
Right. So I think if maybe a bunch of people run it, or a bunch of people would talk to him about what he would be posting, maybe he wouldn't be changing things completely, or maybe he would post things closer to the date and then he wouldn't have to change them. I do see how it can come across as messy, because he does routinely post things like, oh, the administration doesn't want you walking out, or they'll try to stop you, or don't let them stop you, and he's kind of, not to say anything bad against Bennett, but the posts kind of come across as making the school and the administration look bad. They simply don't condone the walkout. They don't disagree with our right to protest, but they have a safety concern for all of us, which makes sense. And right, and so we want to, Haley and I know for sure, want to emphasize the idea that they are not disagreeing with us. They are not our enemy.
They're not bad people.
Right, and I think that, I don't know, just posting stuff like they don't want you walking out or they'll try to stop you. They absolutely did not try to stop us.
Yeah.
Especially when we walked down on the 14th. I mean, I know Haley got a hug from one of the administrators.
Yeah.
No, they definitely.
Yeah,
No, they definitely. They support what we're doing, and they support why we're trying to do it.
As protesting our right to, supporting our right to protest.
Right, so they're not against us. they fear for our safety, which makes sense. I mean, I know some of them are parents, some of them are. I mean, it's their job, and it's who we are as people. We have to sympathize with our.
I mean, there's always a real threat, but I think with like the Instagram, I think
It kind of paints them as enemies,
Yeah.
and which is basically what I'm trying to say. It paints them as bad people, as people who are trying as adversaries, and they're not. They're
yeah. I mean, we know them more personally than before this whole thing started.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I had never met with Dr. Val ever in my life. He lives 2 doors down from me. I live right next to him. And I never talked to him, and I've talked to him more in the last like 2 months than I had in my entire life.
Right.
So I feel like it really like we got to know them better, and we got to know them very well. But I also think with the Instagram was that, in a sense, it was a good idea just because it was like a central thing where people get information. But I feel like the information being posted was not really consistent and concise,
and it was a little bit biased.
and it was a bit bad.
So, which is not a problem. I mean, pertaining to the type of event that this is, but in regards to painting the administration as adversaries and enemies, it dilutes the message, and it paints it in a
I
negative
still
way.
felt like if there was more like with the Instagram, if there was like a more checks and balances system, where like we kind of like initially before the 14th, we were more involved with Bennett. We were telling him like, oh, like post this and stuff like that, but like he never actually like shared with us what he was actually posting word for word until we saw it on Instagram. So,
Right.
So I felt like,
Yeah.
in hindsight, if we were more, at least with the 14th, if we were more consistent.
Yeah, maybe
checking
if
what
we
was being
met with him
posted.
personally before he posted something, it would have been able to get maybe a clear, concise message.
And get more opinions on what was being said.
There was obviously a good number of students who were truly committed to the cause and feel as though that they were marching for their lives. But I think administration was more concerned about those who were just doing it to do it, because that's what everybody else was doing, and what would that lead to, and would there be any other problems? Because sure, I know even the day of the march, some students, there was, it turned out to be a non-credible threat, but there was, a threat made. And some people were very concerned. So people who wanted to walk out didn't walk out because they were afraid of what would happen if they did. So there's a lot of, the students who marched, I give them so much credit for standing up for themselves and doing what they believed was right. But I think that some students would have, I think there were some students there who didn't necessarily support the cause, but I also think that there were some students who would have liked to have gone but were a little too fearful, whether it was they were afraid they'd be in trouble with administration, or they were afraid because they knew that somebody had made a phony threat. Whatever the case, I think it was difficult to gauge how many students really were supporting the cause.
We originally had intended on inviting a politician to speak, but we thought it over, and we just thought that it would make more sense to do this more about the students, have this be more about the students, and not about listening to a politician. Not that we didn't agree with this politician, not think that this politician would make a good representative for us, but we just wanted to make it more centered around the students. And also, Dr. Brown said we can't let them on the grounds. Regardless, we may have been able to figure a way out for them to speak and not be on school grounds, but we just decided it would make more sense to be just student-centered.
I think it was more important that even potential candidates who do support gun reform, they should still listen to students, and this is about us saying what we need and what we want out of our representatives, and not what they believe and trying to promote themselves. They should be listening to us.
I walked out of AP Physics class, 6th period, and it was myself and 2 of my close friends walked out of that class. Right around the time we were supposed to walk out, we were all kind of looking at each other. We knew we were the only 3 people that were going to be walking out of the class, because that whole class, we're all very close, we all speak to each other. So we'd already discussed who was going to be leaving and who wasn't. So we knew it was just us 3, and we were looking at each other, and I said to my friend Lizzie, "Get up and leave." And she said, "No, you get up and leave." And I said, "Why won't you just get up and leave?" And she said, "Well, then maybe we just shouldn't." And in that moment, I kind of realized that this is the issue that's been plaguing youth activists such as myself and her for the longest time. Just nobody knows where to start. Nobody wants to take that first step. So I got up, I didn't say a word to my teacher, I got up, I put my coat on, and I left. So welcome to our walking tour of the walkout. Play on words. I came out of that science hallway door just because I was in physics class, but we kind of streamed out of all entrances of the building, and we all took a walk across this crosswalk to the kind of grassy sort of area over here. And they had some speakers down at the end by the road. And on the opposite side of the road, I should probably film over there. On the opposite side of the road, there were adults from Port Jefferson and a couple other districts that had come to support us with their own signs, their own chants and stuff, just really contributing in any way they could, which made me very happy, personally. It's always good to see other people connected here, you know? Even though I'm not, like, affiliated with a huge group or anything, it makes you happy. Good to know you have friends. That's why I do a lot of what I do. And these gates were closed during the walkout, and I was standing on one of them. I'm not going to do it again because I almost broke it the first time. I mean, I'm very short. I couldn't really see over the crowd, over everyone else that was already here. I got here kind of late, so I was up on this thing chanting and shouting and having the time of my life, you know? And they were closed, by the way, during the walkout. Just kind of in this corner, we had student speakers, speeches from some of the people who planned it, some people who are particularly involved in the kind of the cause otherwise. Didn't go on for very long, but they did say some things that were pretty impactful. I do kind of wish they had brought a megaphone, but that's just me. And then we came all the way back, and we went in through the front entrance of the school. You probably don't want to film all the way back to there, but we came in through the front entrance, and we were checked in the lobby by a couple security guards, which took a very long time. So it was a couple of them to at least 100 of us, I think. About a visual estimation. But it did take kind of a while. It did kind of hold up me getting back to science class, which I am not complaining about. I see you, AP Physics. Yeah, I mean, it was very cold. I mean, March 14th, practically still the middle of winter. That's my birthday, by the way. And I was wearing a jacket, but some of my friends who did not think it was from Florida were not. I felt very bad for them during the whole walkout. I mean, I was like shouting and yelling with like all the force I had, but a bunch of my friends were just like trying not to freeze and die. I'm sure they all learned by the 20th, the one on April 20th. I wasn't there. I had somewhere else to be. I wasn't in school. I wish I could have walked out with them, supported the cause again, especially because the one on the 20th faced so much more opposition. I mean, everyone was saying we already walked out once. We haven't seen any changes in the law. We haven't seen any reaction from Lee Zeldin or any of our other representatives. Why are we doing it again? The reason, for the record, we did it again is because we didn't see anything the first time. We want to make ourselves known. We want to make our desires and our points known. We want to make it known why we don't want to die today or the next day at the hands of a gun. But I wish I could have been there to support the cause again. I'll definitely be around for the next one. And if no one's already in the process of planning the next one, I'll be around to make sure there is a next one. We still have, a couple months before the end of the year? There's going to be a next one. But yeah, so we came back in through the main entrance, and we were all just checked in the lobby. It was very chaotic. Everyone was yelling. People were starting chants, but like kind of opposing chants. You know, just like we were doing our best. It was a lot of our first time. It was my first time ever going to like a real civilian protest. I mean, I've always been kind of a politically active sort of person. I have a lot of causes that I dedicate myself too. I run a nonprofit outside of school, but that was my first taste of like real civilian political action. So a lot of us were kind of like nervous, a little bit shaky, and we didn't really know like what we were doing or how we were doing it. But we made the best of our situation in the freezing cold, snow melting everywhere, got all up in my brand new Converse for the record. And we managed to turn it into something beautiful.
Good morning, and thank you for your courage. I'm glad you're standing with me today. We, the students of Ward Melville High School, along with hundreds of thousands of students across the nation, have had enough. We've had enough of gun violence. We've had enough of Congress's inaction while nearly 1,300 kids are slaughtered each year as a result of gun violence. We've had enough of the NRA buying our representatives with their blood-soaked money. We've had enough of the argument that since we're kids, we can't change anything. That's a lie. We can and we will. Not only are we intelligent and capable, more importantly, we don't let fear stop us from doing what we believe is right and necessary. With that, we have a few simple requests for Congress, specifically for our Congressman Lee Zeldin. Congressman Zeldin, we demand that you introduce or support legislation in Congress which bans assault weapons like the AR-15, which was used to murder 17 innocent people in the Parkland shooting. We demand that you implement universal background checks for any and all gun purchases. We demand that you stop taking money from the NRA, who cares more about the profits of the gun industry than the safety of America's children. Prove that you represent us and not the gun lobby. We demand that you lobby for federal funds to be allocated to New York's Department of Education with the directive that they use that money to increase mental health funding for New York's public schools. Many of us are currently or will be 18 come Election Day on November 6th, and we promise to vote you out if you fail to meet these demands. Civil rights leader and Congressman John Lewis said, "The vote is the most powerful nonviolent tool we have." Let's use that tool to create change. To anyone who says we shouldn't be doing this, that we don't have the right to speak out, we have to take action because our lives are at stake. We have the right to learn, free from the fear that we will be gunned down in our classrooms. Rather than arming teachers with weapons, arm them with resources they need to educate the future leaders of our country. Many important movements in American history have been born out of the voices of young people facing injustice. This is one of those movements.
It was an amazing experience because there was about, I want to say about 200, I might be off, about 200 students who walked out, and it just felt really good to be supported by so many students, because especially in this school, we're definitely not the majority of the school, and there's a lot of hate towards what we stand for, and it's very controversial. So being a part of a group of kids who also feel the same way as you do and who want to promote safety, it feels like very empowering, and it makes you want to continue for the cause because there are kids who hear you and who agree with you and are also trying to take action. And it was great, like just chanting and being a part of a big movement.
I think my greatest concern would probably be that think it's just going to be that one walkout, and then they'll just not stay updated and like be aware of the other walkouts and the bigger ones coming out, and like the other ones that they could participate to, because they think, oh, I did the one in March, like that's it.
Can you explain the reason behind the school's decision to replace the walkout with a forum?
It was to give students an alternative venue in order to express their concerns in a safe manner. They wanted a voice. They wanted to be heard about the salient issues that were affecting them or our nation. And we thought that the forum would be a great opportunity for them to express it, so that they would have a wider audience in the school to listen to their concerns and gain support or momentum for whatever issue.
When the walkout was originally planned, the forum originally was going to be a second walkout, counter walkout on the other side of the school. More of we marketed it as a walkout for real solutions, meaning we wanted to go out there and instead of chanting slogans and yelling and going after politicians, we wanted to say these are what we think could make the best changes, and these are the things that we think could create the most conversation and change in the country. And once the school got involved and said that they didn't want the walkouts happen, but they had said that there would be this alternative that they could host, we jumped on that instead and thought this would be a better way to kind of have a conversation.
Okay. On behalf of the students that are next to me, and your principal, Dr. Baum, I would like to thank each of you for showing civic responsibility in the form of attendance at this important forum.
And a walkout!
Basically, Dr. Gold asked one overarching question. Each side had a certain amount of time to give an opening statement for that question. And then afterwards, the audience could ask questions to us, and then we would respond.
Going into it, I had no idea what it was going to be like or what the setup was at all, because that information really was not made very public to the rest of the school. I was asking all my friends before, nobody knew. But we were all crammed into the auditorium, trying to find seats. I think more people wanted to go than they were expecting. I think they did end up having to turn some people down because there just weren't enough seats. There was a point brought up about how Israel in 1978, I believe, mandated armed guards in all of its schools. I have dedicated a lot of my life to studying Israel and its limited history. I am Jewish. I have a ton of family that lives there. It's a subject that's very close to me. So I know, which most people probably wouldn't, that in 78, Israel was in the middle of war with several of its neighboring countries. Specifically, South Lebanon was the big one at that time. And they were seeing almost a record high of domestic militant action from invaders from Lebanon and from Palestinians residing within Israel. So the armed guards that were placed in schools really were not in response to any situation similar to one we have today. It was a wartime protocol against vastly increased levels of domestic terrorism. I'm talking suicide bombers, things like that. So comparing it to today's situation, using it as a justification for arming guards in our schools today, is really comparing apples and oranges. It's not a valid comparison. There was also a factual inaccuracy concerning gun laws in Switzerland.
And we can look at places like Switzerland, that every citizen is owning a gun, and they were trained, and they have military service, and they have one of the lowest gun crime rates in all of the world.
Most people think that this is because everyone in Switzerland has to do mandatory military service, which is true. But the fact of the matter is, Switzerland has some of the most restrictive gun laws out of any country in the world. You are not allowed to transport your weapons loaded. If they are in public, they must be unloaded, except with a permit, which is nearly impossible to obtain. you need to be able to prove that you were transporting your weapon in public at all for one of a very short list of acceptable purposes, and it cannot be loaded outside either your home or your friend's home or a shooting range. So this is the real reason why there are so few gun-related deaths in the country every year. It's nothing to do with mandatory military service. It's nothing to do with they know how to handle their guns better than we do. They have taken the action that I would like to see America take today.
Personally, because we only really decided on the walkout, the forum, a few minutes before the walkout actually started, we really weren't able to fully discuss what the plans were going to be.
Yeah, the forum was kind of just thrown together.
Yeah, and so, I mean, sure, we had our arguments, but we weren't able to find a lot of evidence and support for our arguments. I mean, while we know of some important ones, there were still some little aspects that we could have had better support for. And so, personally, on our side, when we made a claim, the other side was able to respond efficiently with evidence because they had already been planning on this forum and they had time to prepare their arguments. While I am not saying that it was, I would say, a big advantage, it gave us the impression of looking kind of incompetent and confused.
Hi, I'm Corinne Age. I'm a sophomore, and I experience very heavy mental health issues. I have bipolar disorder. I have been in the hospital twice in the last year. I have been around people who want to shoot up their own school. I have known people who want to shoot up a school. They are just as mentally ill as me. They do not deserve guns. We should regulate and control these guns. No one should own a semi-automatic. No one mentally ill should own a semi-automatic. Why do you think someone like me?
I think that when I was up on stage and she stood up and asked, I answered her question.
I apologize. What was your name again? Corinne?
Yes.
I feel like there's a false narrative that's created in this country that half of the country doesn't agree on these things. People with a severe mental health problem should not be able to get a hold of a gun, and we should pass legislation that ensures that.
That's literally what we're proposing. You're saying that.
Well, no, because it was my time.
We literally just.
When she stood up, at first when she started talking about it, I did feel a little bit awkward about answering it because I didn't want to offend her. I didn't want to make her feel any less by my answer. Because if I was being straight up, I would say someone like you or someone who has a mental illness probably should not be able to have access to a firearm. And that's not because I'm worried about something you're going to do. I'm worried that it will create more problems than it will solve. And I'm worried that if someone with a very low-level form of depression is able to get a gun, then people will say, well, if these people can get a gun, then why can't all the people with mental illnesses get a gun? And I feel like that shouldn't happen. Someone with a mental illness that is severe should not be able to get a firearm because they could end up becoming a danger to themselves or somebody else.
I think it's important that she spoke up because she was getting it. She had the courage to kind of say to the whole school, "Hey, I'm someone with mental health who has a mental health disorder, and that issue is something completely different than gun reform." And I think it's important and just courageous of her that she spoke up in front of everyone. And I think that some people took the message the wrong way. I mean, I know in particular there were a few posts on Instagram saying this was a disrespect to the mental health awareness community, and I don't really think that's what she was going for. I think she was just trying to emphasize that there was an important difference between the two issues.
Yeah, I also felt like she used it as a way to emphasize why we need gun reform because she has first-hand experience seeing seeing people who do have mental illnesses who want to shoot up their schools or hurt someone with a gun. So I think what she was trying to do was show that it is a real issue and we need gun reform to prevent these people from getting guns and doing something that could harm people.
I think, overall, we actually came into agreement several times, like having metal detectors Mental health was a priority for both of us. The only like hot button issue was really security guards and arming them, and I think like that was like the 18% accuracy versus like having a 0% chance if you didn't have an armed security guard. That was like the point of greatest contention.
At this point, we're running a bit low on time, but clearly this is an opportunity for some healthy thought and this debate and discussion. I'd like to thank everybody that participated up here, and I think they all deserve a round. At this point, before you get up, and I please ask you to be seated respectfully for just a second, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Brown.
I too want to join in congratulating our panel, Dr. Gold and Mr. Pelosi. You know, these students up here, they are bright, they are articulate, they have their acts together, and I know that they, along with so many of you in this audience, are going to make a change in this country. You know, as Dr. Gold said when we first started out this afternoon, our country started with an idea. One individual had a thought. That individual started talking to other individuals. One thing led to another, and here we are today because one individual had an idea, had a thought, and acted on it. I am imploring you, no matter where you stand with this particular issue or any other issue, you are at the precipice of entering civic life. You must engage in that. You must stay involved. You must exercise your right to vote. Students, those individuals between 18 and 24, and our senior citizens, you are the largest voting bloc in the United States. When you have your act together, you can accomplish great things. So continue to lobby your legislators at all levels of government, exercise your right to vote, and most importantly, or maybe not most importantly, I know from experience, thank you all for your civility and passion.
The town hall, our group, Students Act for Change, and March for Our Lives on Island, we came together to create a town hall, but things fell through. So March for Our Lives on Island did end up doing the town hall, but we were planning on doing one at a later date because we wanted to have press there and be more an open event. Where March for Our Lives Long Island decided they wanted to do more of a closed event with just students from certain schools, and we wanted to include everyone, so as many people as they could ask questions to potential representatives after November and participate in government. The plan was to address it was just mainly for gun safety. We wanted to ask about the NRA, and we did invite Lee Zeldin. He didn't end up showing to the one for March for Our Lives. We were going to ask him if he was going to continue to take money from the NRA. We wanted to ask what the other candidates' views were on gun safety and how they were going to potentially propose bills or maybe try and pass legislation that would protect students from gun laws, and instead of just promoting arming teachers or armed guards.
So there were not a lot of Ward Melville people there. It was me and maybe one or two other people, but there were a lot of people there just in general, maybe about 75, I want to say, but a really bad visual estimation. It was a town hall geared mostly at teens and young adults, but there were a lot of adults that came. Some were parents, my mom went, but a lot of them were independent adults that just showed up to show up. And six, I think they were all Democrats, 6 Democratic candidates for the 1st Congressional District seat, which is where we live, 1st Congressional District of New York. That election's in November. 6 candidates showed up to speak to the audience, and they had 6 questions, 1 per candidate, and then other candidates could answer the questions. It was laid out a little bit chaotically, but it wasn't that bad. I did like some of the candidates more than some of the others. This was hosted by March for Our Lives, Long Island branch, by the way. I don't know if I remember.
Why was it hosted? Like,
what do you mean?
why was like this town hall like hosted? Like who?
Really I think in a way it was kind of to inform the youth of the platforms of some of the political candidates that are going to be most conducive to their ideals, to their views, to what we think should be done, but also just kind of to rally, to have a point politically and socially that we can gather around, that we can speak about in an educated and civil setting, and really just to share our ideas.
You were not here during Unity Day, correct?
I was not.
But you are friends with Sam Kim, who ran that?
Yes.
So do you know enough from him to explain what happened and overall the event's goal?
So I don't know how the actual day went, but I know that the goal of the event was kind of to celebrate political activism among the student body from all sides, to celebrate also diversity within our school and within its attendant political movements. He brought in, I think, a lot of clubs. A couple clubs had like booths and stuff. They were doing like activities to promote diversity or whatever. I was technically on the planning committee for this, even though I never made a meeting just because of my awful schedule. I'm in too many things at once.
Do you feel like we should have like a form instead of like this Unity Day, or do you think like Unity Day might actually serve a better purpose than like the form and what happened on the 14th?
If I could have it my way, I'd say both. I think a Unity Day is great. I don't think a Unity Day necessarily deals with the issue of guns. I think it kind of shows that the school is united, which I hope the school is united as a whole. But I'd like to do both. I think a Unity Day is great, but I think that a follow-up forum with more planning and more organization could really go a long way to allowing students to hear a lot of other perspectives. Sure, you could create toxicity from discussion, but I think you create more toxicity not discussing things. So I would take discussion over not discussing anything.
Before we wrap up, is there anything that I haven't mentioned that you'd like to add, like maybe what people can do with this issue, or like?
Learn up. Go online. Look at who your representatives are. Look at who your senators are. Look at who your local elected officials are. Find out what their positions are on these things, and if their positions agree with what you believe in, vote for them. If their positions don't agree with you, then vote for the person running against them. Get active in politics. If you're 18, you got to register to vote. I did it a couple weeks ago when I turned 18. And just kind of get informed on the issues. A lot of people will take the side of their parents, or a lot of people will take the side against their parents, and they won't really look into the issues themselves. My family was very heavily involved in politics. My dad was a New York State Senator. My grandfather was a New York State Supreme Court judge and served under Ronald Reagan as an Assistant Secretary of State. So politics has always been in my blood and kind of been something that I'm passionate about. But a lot of people don't always have that. A lot of people, some parents just don't talk politics. Or some people just get their opinions off quick Facebook videos and don't do much research. That's the most important thing. Do research on what you're passionate about and base your opinions off of that.
I would like to stress for everyone who believes firmly in this issue or even against this issue, I would say you should register to vote and definitely go out there and vote, because whether you're for or against this issue, like getting out there and getting your voice to be heard and not just sitting at home and saying, well, oh, I wish this would happen, oh, I wish this would happen, but I guess my voice doesn't matter. Well, it does, because everyone's vote does matter, and I think registering yourself to vote and registering people you know to vote and getting out there and actually voting come November is one of the most important things that we have to do at this time. So I would just urge everyone to do that.
Get involved with organizations that are pushing for the issues you agree with.
Right.
Because that's like how you're going to get your voice heard.
Mm-hmm.
Go out and
Get your voice heard.
Yeah.
Speak up for what you believe